Welcome back. Last week we discussed the ways in which Trump's erratically implemented tariffs are raising the prices you pay while also failing to return production to the United States.
What we did not mention is that Congress can actually pass legislation right now to take back tariff implementation authority from the president. This would both stabilize prices and financial markets.
The reason we didn't discuss this legislative solution is that to become law, any such legislation would require broad support not just from congressional Democrats, but also congressional Republicans. And this is not going to happen, certainly not in the U.S. House.
There's a variety of reasons for this, but today we're going to focus on one practice that helped explain a lot of Republicans' unwillingness to confront the president on matters like tariffs and the rule of law.
Today we're going to talk about gerrymandering.
The United States House of Representatives has 435 members, each of whom represents one congressional district. Unlike state lines, the boundaries among congressional districts change over time. In fact, districts are redrawn every 10 years in a process referred to as redistricting.
There are many reasons why redistricting is necessary, but at its core, redistricting is needed because the U.S. Constitution requires that all districts within a state be roughly equal in population. This means that as people move around and certain parts of the state become more populous, maps must be redrawn periodically in order to keep some districts from becoming more populated than others.
So who's drawing these maps? Even though Congress is part of the federal government, this process of congressional redistricting is actually overseen by the states, with each state more or less free to choose how it wants to do redistricting. In the vast majority of states, the process is basically as follows. The congressional district's map is drawn by select members of the state legislature. The legislature then votes on the map. Once the map passes the legislature's vote, it's sent to the governor, who, if approving of the map, signs it into law.
So what could go wrong in this process? Today, in over 75% of U.S. states, all levers of power, meaning the legislature and governor's office, are controlled by one party.
This means that in many states, one party has full control of the congressional redistricting process, so they can manipulate it to the advantage of their own people.
How might a party go about manipulating the redistricting process? Let's take a hypothetical state whose population is evenly split between Republicans and Democrats.
The state government, which is controlled by Republicans, is tasked with dividing the state into 4 congressional districts. Here's how they might go about manipulating the process to their advantage.
First, they pack some of the Democrats into one district, then they divide the remaining population into 3 districts, each of which is 2/3 Republican. The district at the bottom is almost certain to elect a Democrat. Each of the 3 districts above it, with a population that is 67% Republican, is almost certain to elect a Republican. As a result, the division of the state's representatives, or seats, in the House of Representatives is going to look like this, with 3 Republicans and 1 Democrat.
In other words, 75% of seats will be solidly Republican. In a state whose population is 50% Republican and 50% Democratic, that's a 25 percentage point difference between the makeup of the state population and the makeup of its representatives in Congress.
This practice of manipulating districts is often referred to as gerrymandering.
Obviously, the numbers in that example were extremely simplified, but that 25 percentage point difference is actually very realistic.
In fact, in the 6 states where the map drawing process was completely controlled by Democrats, which have 41 seats across them, Democrats won an average of 90% of the seats in the 2024 congressional elections. However, the average population in these states was, based on the results of the 2024 presidential election, only 54% Democratic. This means that, on average, the seats in these states were 36 percentage points more Democratic than the population.
The 16 states where Republicans completely controlled the redistricting process saw Republicans win an average of 86% of seats, despite having a population that was 60% Republican. The difference in seats and population in these states was therefore 26 percentage points, almost identical to the difference between seats and population in our example, and even less than the difference in the states where Democrats completely controlled the redistricting process.
So, how does gerrymandering contribute to today's broken politics? Generally speaking, if you're a representative for a competitive district, one whose district population is close to 50% Democratic and 50% Republican, your best path to re-election is to take positions that are supported by voters of both parties. But if you represent a gerrymandered district whose population is mostly members of your party, the general election is so lopsided as to be irrelevant. And all you need to do to be re-elected is to appeal to members of your own party.
In 2024, 2/3 of the members of the U.S. House won their general elections in landslides. This means that 2/3 of the current House falls into that second hyper-partisan category. The best way to prevent gerrymandering is to change the redistricting process such that no one party can pass a map on its own. To this end, many states have set up independent or nonpartisan redistricting commissions to draw their maps. While their structures vary, these commissions all prevent either party from exercising full control of the redistricting process. Over the following days, we'll be posting some companion videos on a couple topics. First, we'll be discussing the gerrymandering of state legislative districts and how this impacts state politics and the functioning of state governments.
Then in our second video, we'll discuss the Voting Rights Act and protections against gerrymandering, which have been gutted over the past decade to the point that partisan gerrymandering can no longer be checked by any federal court.
And in 2 weeks, join us as we look at the 2017 Trump tax law and discuss who benefits from the myriad ways in which it changed the country's tax code.